this.
All right, and we should be live now. So, you guys know me, I'm Mental Outlaw. This is Son of a Tech, and he is became a full-time crypto miner slash YouTuber. Well, he's been a YouTuber for a while, and I guess a crypto miner for a little while, but it recently became at least good enough for him to do that full time. So it is actually something that you can be an entrepreneur by doing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty new. I only actually left my day job on Tuesday, so Tuesday of this past week, and primarily it was getting set up. So I've been mining crypto for, I guess, since 2016, so that would be 5 years, and then I've been doing YouTube for probably 10 years with a mix between tech, gaming, and crypto. And obviously, crypto is where the key terms are at for YouTube to get any sort of traction, unless you're already well established in something like tech or gaming, right? So I took that path, and that's kind of where I've been headed. And so it's been good enough to facilitate me being able to go full time and give it a shot this year. So we're going for it.
Yeah, it's funny seeing how the bull run has affected social media, right? Like everywhere you go now, every ad that I ever see on YouTube, every video that gets recommended to me, it's all about crypto.
Well, and early on, so in 2016, it was kind of that way, 2016 through like 2018. And that's where I got kind of the initial following in the crypto space. The odd part about it was at the time they also started banning crypto ads, so the CPM dropped, which was really rough as a crypto channel, because I was like, oh, we're doing good, we're doing good, we're doing good. And then it was like hammered down because they went through kind of one of those adpocalypse things with crypto ads, mainly because of all the bad press from ICOs, which is warranted, right? And that kind of killed off any ad revenue for crypto channels at the time. So a lot of crypto channels kind of shifted to, taking outside ads, I suppose. And then obviously, I think Ivan on Tech and a few others started their own kind of live stream service outside of YouTube itself, right, to help monetize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just using, the term crypto, that's obviously very vague. So let's start getting into specifics. What cryptos are you mining right now?
Well, obviously Ethereum. So I'm of the mindset that you mine what's most profitable, unless, like, of course, I have some like hedge mining stuff going on, or even play around with different things, even just for videos for fun, right? And then Monero on the CPUs, because you have CPUs that are in your mining rigs, you might as well put them to work. And obviously, with the privacy and everything of Monero, I'm pretty big on that one. And then
Yeah,
it's, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, as far as the different cryptos go, Monero is probably the one that I'm the most interested in. Because, like we were talking about before we went live, my primary interest in crypto is a replacement for fiat currency. Because I won't go off on a whole political rant, but basically, if you know the deal with fiat currency, it's just created out of thin air, right? There's really nothing backing it. The dollar used to be back to gold, but now we're kind of all just pretending that this money has value or that it doesn't have any intrinsic value. And then it's issued by a private corporation to the government. So there's some shenanigans that are going on there, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize that, especially during the pandemic, right? Where what was
Mhm.
it, 20 trillion or something like that? Some just ungodly amount of number where it sounds like something that wouldn't even apply to money was just pumped back into the economy to fix it.
Right.
So yeah,
And
we need something to replace it.
and I think that obviously, with everything that's going on, and the inflation rates, the value of Bitcoin going up makes a little bit more sense than it did with the initial bubble, on the last halving, right? So the bubbles pretty much happen in a pattern right around the same time as Bitcoin halves. And that's kind of something to look at. But this time, I think there's a little bit more weight behind it because of the things you've mentioned, right? So
Yeah, it's I don't know how much longer it's gonna be, right? Because these things take time for people to sort of switch over. Um, Now, as far as your rigs go, what exactly are you running? Do you have GPU powered rigs, CPU powered? Do you got a bunch of ASICs running?
I'm actually traditionally against ASICs in the past. Obviously, there's, if you want to mine Bitcoin, then you need ASICs. And then that just comes down to like what you're willing to concede on, right? So the problem with ASIC is kind of multifaceted. One, it encourages centralization of the hash power, right? Primarily due to the fact that there's a limited amount of manufacturers. And then secondary to that, it causes more e-waste because basically once you're done mining with ASIC and they become irrelevant, they just get dumped. They can't be used for other purposes at that point because application specific. So I stick with GPU mining because I mine from my house, right? So and then what I'm able to do then is kind of trade and upgrade and sell, and there's value in those cards afterwards, right?
Of course. Now, if you're running GPUs, I'm guessing you're primarily running NVIDIA GPUs. I think I actually saw a video of yours where you've got a 3090. You have that in one of your rigs, right?
So I'm actually primarily running AMD GPUs. I'm running the 50. I have a large portion of my farm is 5700 XTs.
Oh, nice.
And that's because you can BIOS mod them. If you get the Samsung models, so I started doing this last year where I was just going to Best Buy and buying all the 5700s that they had and then returning any that had Micron memory. Because you can BIOS flash them essentially to run at about 57 mega hash a second at 90 watts. The Microns run a little higher, around 110 watts. So if you're really trying to be as efficient as possible, that's what you wanted to do. Now, of course, we're in a super difficult tech market or GPU market where now it's kind of get whatever you can at retail. So and then for the YouTube channel, obviously I try to buy one of every GPU regardless of how I think they're going to perform or anything so that we can test and verify on the YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, going to Best Buy and buying all the GPUs. I actually used to work at a Best Buy a few years ago, and I remember a couple of people doing that. And I
Mhm.
should have caught on earlier because I probably could have bought more GPUs and actually started mining. I used to mine like every night. Um, I would do Ethereum just with my graphics card, but I just have a little 970, right? It's not
Yeah.
it's not really meant for it, but I would basically do that because I was like, well, I'm leaving my computer on overnight anyway, and it's not even necessarily that profitable. It's mostly just to, I guess, add my little insignificant amount of hash power to the network to try and keep things a little bit more decentralized.
Yeah, and that's kind of the weird argument. I just did a video where I was testing like the hash rate on the 5800X for Monero. And it's kind of one of those things where a lot of people's focus is leaning towards how much fiat can I make mining, right? And that's a little, I understand that because that's kind of like where we're at right now. Um, and then so they don't want to mine things like Monero. But one of the strong points of Monero, even from just their consensus mechanism, which is proof of work and focused on ASIC resistant and CPU only, means that it's not even possible for like a miner like myself to stack up you can maybe get a quad socket board, right? Like a server grade quad socket board and load that down. But that's pretty much about it. You can't just attach 13 GPUs to a single motherboard. So what that ends up doing is creating more decentralization for the network because of that barrier to entry. So that's one of the things I appreciate about Monero, even though from a miner's perspective, it's not super profitable, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the weird things that is going on with crypto. So you've got I guess different minds that are approaching it. So you've got the people like myself that are really interested in it, both for the technology, because of course blockchain isn't just it's not just something for currency. Like you have Ethereum, for example, where I've done a video explaining it. Son of a Tech has done many as well, explaining all the different things you can do with Ethereum, the smart contracts and dApps. But for me, I'm most interested in crypto to replace fiat. So I'm more interested in Monero, but it's not very profitable. So if you're a miner, you're really not going to make money with Monero. And as far as like flipping it or speculating it, well, a lot of that's luck anyway, right? Luck or, I guess connections. People talk about coins getting bogged all the time. But yeah, there's many different people that are approaching it. Like one of my buddies, family friends in Virginia, he's like the 65-year-old guy, doesn't really know anything about Bitcoin, but he's holding over 50 grand in Bitcoin. So yeah, there's all these, and he's having more of an effect on it than I am because I've got some Bitcoin, but I'm not really that interested in it.
Well, it's I think the traditional financial advisors now, which is one of the big differences between the last bubble and this bubble, are getting in and even recommending that retail investors put 1% of their investment into cryptocurrency, which is wild just to think about that. Because it has always in the past been considered a poor investment choice, right? That was the narrative, at least like in mainstream media and so forth. So it's kind of funny to see it kind of shifting there. But Monero won't be able to be one of those because of how much it opposes traditional financial institutions, which to your point, if the whole idea of cryptocurrency is to have a replacement for fiat that is decentralized and permissionless and trustless, then Monero would be the way to go. But as it sits right now, if you are depending on your geographical location, you're going to have a tough time converting Monero to fiat, right? And so you have to convert it to a different cryptocurrency and then move it. So really, if you want a true peer-to-peer trustless system, then you really have to have a way and people that want to exchange Monero with you. So that's kind of the biggest obstacle I see at this point, right? And Bitcoin's been kind of accepted primarily because you can trace it easier, right? So
Yeah, and that's also one of the interesting things that I've noticed about it because I remember when I was talking to this guy who, like I said, he's got over 50 grand in Bitcoin. When he was giving me some of the reasons why he bought it, which of course he bought it to make money, but you don't just and this is just how I think, I guess. Whenever I buy a stock or a cryptocurrency, I'm thinking of what value does this really have, right? Like if I could boil down this decision into, I don't know, one paragraph explanation of why I think this has value, that's what I have to do before I'm really going to put my money behind it. And when this guy was explaining to me why he bought Bitcoin, I just told him, "You're describing Monero." So he's a little bit more, I guess you would say, like libertarian. So that's
mhm.
part of the reason why he was into it, because he's like, yeah, this will replace money and blah blah blah, Federal Reserve, all that jazz. Uh, and I'm like, yeah, it probably won't though, because it's highly public, and I know a lot of people say that they don't really care about privacy, but I don't see people publishing their reports from their credit card. I don't see people, publishing all their bank transactions that they make. So, but that's what you get with Bitcoin, right? If this really was going to be a globally used currency, or within a country, right, used as a currency, everyone is going to be able to see your address and see every single thing that you bought with it. They're going to know, say, if you donate to a political campaign, that you did that, and they're going to know which one and how much you donated. And I think if people knew that, if there was some way to put that knowledge into the brain of every human being on the planet, I honestly think that you would see Bitcoin's market cap plummet.
I mean, I think there's an argument there, right? And I understand that. That's why, like I said, I do fully agree with you as far as like Bitcoin versus Monero. I kind of always equate it though to, I guess, the Ford Motor Company. This is the analogy I like to use, where there was a time when there weren't gas stations on every corner and people would tell you you're stupid for buying a Model T. Why don't you just buy a nicer horse carriage or whatever? And people were having to tow their cars with with a horse or whatnot. And when there is an advancement in any technology, and this is throughout history, there's always kind of this weird, awkward period where you're kind of towing along the new technology with whatever the old ways were, right? And it's kind of like that for cryptocurrency right now. And I think the future will be different, and then we can maybe move it towards the, I guess, what I would call the principles of Bitcoin. Because if you go back and read like the Bitcoin white paper, and then before that you go back and read like the Cypherpunk Manifesto, then you start getting an idea of why it was created and where it came from, which is the idea that like you should be concerned about your privacy, right, and security. And that is a right that you shouldn't just give up. And with the kind of the creation of the internet and stuff, we and cell phones and whatever else, we've kind of just given that away, right? And Bitcoin was supposed to be the financial answer to that portion, right? And very well Monero could be, and could be the answer to that as well.
Let's hope so. Long as nobody is able to claim that IRS bounty, right?
Well, yeah, you still got to pay your taxes, right? So
Well,
you,
according to some people, not according to John McAfee. Um,
well, yeah. And I guess that's why he's in a jail in Spain. I got to talk with him in Dallas at the Bitcoin conference there, and watch his speech, and that was super awesome. I have a selfie with him, which is cool.
Sweet. So let's sort of shift gears back into a little bit more technical and current news. What do you think about NVIDIA's decision to more move towards cutting the efficiency of their GeForce cards? And do you think that those CMPs that they're offering up are going to actually be a viable solution to keep both the gamers and the miners happy? I know you said that you're already on Team Red for your mining rig, so it sounds like this won't even really be something that affects you personally.
Well, it'll affect me because we have a YouTube channel that covers it all. So my thoughts on this go back to my thoughts on ASICs, meaning if you have a mining specific GPU, then once you're done mining with it or it becomes irrelevant, it turns into e-waste. This is not good for the environment, nor is it good for the economy. And I think NVIDIA's play here is trying to prevent what happened during the last crypto boom, where once the crypto mining was done and miners started selling their cards on the secondhand market to gamers, gamers were not purchasing new cards from NVIDIA. So this is a business decision at the end of the day for NVIDIA. It has nothing to do with helping out gamers or helping out miners. As far as the cards themselves, there's only one card you should be looking at to mine with, which would be the 90HX, which is on the latest architecture from NVIDIA. And all of the other cards are basically rebrands of previous generation architectures as far as its Turing. And then I think there is actually two that are even older, like Pascal. So I don't know. Like I said, that's pretty much where I sit on it. I think they turn into e-waste.
Yeah, because I remember I was looking at them, and the 90HX, if I'm not mistaken, was supposed to have a hash rate of 90 mega hashes.
Yeah, so it's essentially the 3080 from
Right.
best I can tell. Obviously, there'll be differences there. They will be tuned down cores or bad binned cores, because traditionally with mining Ethereum, you don't need a big core clock. I'm pretty sure NVIDIA is aware of that. So they'll take all the poor performing chips out of the 30 series line and smack them on there, throw the memory bus on the GPU that they're kind of planning to utilize, and go from there. So yeah, it's essentially going to do, I mean, at the end of the day, you're probably looking at anywhere from 87 mega hash to 100 mega hash at anywhere from 220 to 280 watts, depending on how good you are at tuning those in, right?
Yeah, and they have to be really cheap, right? Like they obviously have to be cheaper than a 3080 because why would you buy basically a 3080 that can't do anything but mine crypto? That's
Hmm.
what this 90HX would be. So it would have to be significantly cheaper to, undercut that and to actually keep people um, interested in it, right? Because again, it's going to be an application specific integrated circuit. Um, well, is it really supposed to be an ASIC? Because when I was reading about it, it
No,
looked like it was only going to be used for Ethereum. Is it at
I'd
least going to
say
be multi-coin
I
or
right. You need to be very careful on the wording there. I said I
right?
equate it to the same thing as ASICs because of the e-waste and the lack of usability outside of mining crypto. You could potentially use them for rendering farms, but because of the poor core clock quality or the poor chip quality that I assume is going to be in there, they probably won't be great for that. And then, yes, you could mine other coins, but once again, once new GPUs are out that are better and faster and mining faster, um, they'll be faster for other algorithms and other coins as well.
Yeah, because AMD isn't doing this. AMD they're kind of like just do whatever the hell you want with our cards, right? We don't care if you game on them, render with
Well,
them, mine with them.
so the thing with AMD is the latest generation 6000 series is not that great for mining, at least mining Ethereum. They are pretty good at Kapal, which is Ravencoin, if you've heard of that one. But they're not very great at Ethereum in particular. So a lot of people weren't going out to snag them up. They're about 60 mega hash a second at about 120 watts, right? So miners weren't really already after it. If you notice, they really changed their design, their board design a lot with this latest release on the 6000 series, and they decreased the memory bus width essentially, and compensated for that as far as gaming and traditional workloads with Infinity Cache, right?
Right.
Or, so the mining performance, because mining is typically very memory intensive, isn't as good on this series. And then additionally, we can't ignore the fact that they have been taking a lot of the same uh, policies in their drivers that NVIDIA has in the past, and have been kind of slowly rolling out a lot of blocks. 6000 series, you really can't flash them. This started back with actually the second release set of the 5600 XT, where they basically have a BIOS lock where if you flash it, it'll brick the card. There's some ways around that. Obviously, for the 6000 series, the ways around that aren't quite ready. You can still do more power tool, but essentially all that is doing is adjusting the registry entries for the allowed amount of voltage and overclocking you can perform.
Right. So with Ethereum, the most recent change to it, EIP 1559.
Mhm.
So how do you think? I haven't watched the full dev call, but I read some articles on it and talked about it a little bit after I felt like I sort of understood it. How do you think that's going to affect mining moving forward? It looks like to me what's going to pretty much happen is that the fees that miners are receiving, the gas that you have to pay every time you flip a coin or you're transferring Ethereum from one person to another, is going to be cut by quite a bit. But now Ethereum is supposed to be on a deflationary schedule, which
Mhm.
might make the individual coins worth more. So do you think that that sort of balancing out is going to happen? Do you think we're going to see any major shifts, and do you think that any like significant miners are going to try and diffuse the I forget what they call it, like the
The difficulty bomb.
yes, the difficulty
Yeah.
bomb. Do you think we're going to see
So
that?
it doesn't necessarily have to be diffused for by a miner to be significantly profitable, meaning that there is incentive out there for anybody to diffuse the difficulty bomb because within the first week, they could make so much money that it's not even funny. And was specifically stated in the dev call that they're very aware of this. The reason they're putting the diff bomb in there is that they said, basically what they said was, if they're going to make that amount of money off of forking it and diffusing the bomb, they need to work for it. So that's why we're going to do the diff bomb now. Additionally, that was also a way to strong arm miners into mining the proper chain. They did state that specifically as well. So they are they're transparent. I'll give them that. I don't know if that was the best move from a PR standpoint, but you know, that it is what it is, right? As far as profitability for miners, it's projections right now from the core dev team was 20 to 30% drop. They're trying to push this thing called MEV, which is like miner extracted value, as a way to compensate for that, and having pools adopt it. There are currently 2 pools that have adopted it. One adopted it back in January, and the other one just recently adopted it. It's UU pool adopted it back in January. I'm actually currently testing that pool right now. And then Spider pool is the other one. My problem with MEV, though, is that it is essentially front running and back running, which is essentially, think of it like what happened with GameStop stops or game stonks. I can't do it. But when people were shorting, it's kind of a manner of shorting where you put the mining pool, as far as I understand it, if there's a big whale that comes in for a transaction, they'll pay the high fees. But to rebalance the pool, the miner will basically borrow leverage of Ethereum and put in their own transaction ahead of it. And then on the back burning, that's a side channel or back channel deal between the mining pool and somebody trying to liquidate to come right after an Oracle update. And they'll basically say, you pay me this amount and I'll put your transaction in right after the Oracle update. So both of those are not things that I think are good for the Ethereum network regardless of mining, but it was what they said to have the mining pools do to extract more value out of it for miners themselves. So do with that what you will. Though that's just kind of the information as far as I understand it.
So let's get into some speculation questions.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin touched a $1 trillion market cap briefly. When do you think it's going to go back past $1 trillion? What kind of critical mass do you think it's going to have to get to the point where, I guess, it stabilizes? And do you ever think it even will stabilize?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not a trader, nor am I a financial advisor. I am just a tech guy that really kind of stumbled into cryptocurrency from A, being able to program on the blockchain, which I thought was cool, and B, being able to play with graphics cards. So my perspective from, I guess, like, what would you call it? The financial perspective and the speculation, I don't have any really gems there. You would probably want to check with like a trading channel or something along those lines. Now, stabilization of the price would depend on stabilization of fiat as well. So the thing about Bitcoin in general is that there is a limited supply. And the thing about fiat is that there is an unlimited supply. So yes, Bitcoin is volatile by nature not because Bitcoin's unstable, but probably more because fiat's unstable, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I would partially agree with that. Generally, the more money that gets pumped into something, right, whether it's a stock or a cryptocurrency, that's usually when it tends to stabilize. So, and with Bitcoin, like I said, it got up to a $1 trillion market cap. That's pretty significant because there's only like a handful of companies that are out there that have market caps that are in the trillions. Like Apple, for example, I think they're only at about 2 trillion. Like they just recently crossed that threshold. And then like that's also a level of money where it's the GDP of some countries, right? Like there's
Right.
some so, if you look at it just as a, I guess, financial entity, it's almost like it's more powerful than some countries that exist out there. And they're not all third world countries either. They're first world, or I don't know, maybe
Mhm.
second world, if that's a thing.
And every time people have tried to manipulate it, I have seen a little bit of success, but it's all been short-term success, right? Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, what manipulation can you do? I guess the biggest one would be a 51% attack. But I think Bitcoin is at the point where that would be, well, I kind of talked about this,
mm,
where
yeah.
if a 51% attack were to occur with Bitcoin, Ethereum, or I think any really large currency, it would probably have to be a government that pulls it off. And the only one that I think could realistically pull it off is China. And that's just because of the
Well,
fact that so many miners and so many mining pools are centralized within Chinese borders.
you also have to take into account that the primary manufacturer of the ASICs is Bitmain in China.
Right.
Um, and then if you take that into account, plus whatever firmware, who knows? Who knows what firmware they started putting on them? Yeah, I mean, if you want to get like the tinfoil hat out, right? I mean, there's
Let's get it
definitely
out, man.
you.
Let's get
Yeah,
interested.
you could say that China could just go ahead and flip a switch theoretically and take over all of the Bitmain miners and just perform whatever attack they wanted in theory. Because at the end of the day, right, it's all manufactured at the same place, it's all built by the same people, and it's all running the same software. So, or push a firmware update, right, of some sort. Everybody downloads it.
Yeah, yeah. The centralization of any crypto, or at least any one that we're gonna, actually really say has value, because obviously there's meme coins out there. I'm not gonna say what is or isn't a meme coin so that people don't get upset, but yeah, you want to avoid any centralization. Don't join a pool that's super full. Like there's with Monero, I think it's Mine XMR right now has about
Mhm.
30% of the hash rate, so it's a little bit dangerous. In fact, the first two combined have about 60% of Monero's hash rate. So yeah, at least it's divided against two pools, but how likely is it that two pools could end up colluding together and then wreck
Right.
Monero? How likely is it for them to get taken over, right? For the pools to
Well, it
just
comes
get
down to
compromised?
financial incentive, right? So if the financial incentive is there to collude, then it could be there. That could be a possibility, right?
Yeah,
Um,
which I think it does exist with Monero, like Bitcoin. I don't think you're really going to see governments, unless they're just super ignorant of what Bitcoin is, try to shut it down, because it's really, again, if we're going to treat it like a currency, it's the best currency ever for the government. It's the best. It tracks everything you do. It's fully public. Anybody can audit it. And then if you combine that with the fact that everybody, well, not everyone, but just about everyone is getting their coins from exchanges, which require all your information, at least if it's a cash exchange, yeah, you can just connect that right up to police records and see who's who. So Bitcoin, I don't really think there would be a financial incentive for anyone who could wreck it to wreck it. But with Monero, it's definitely there. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a bounty that the IRS has launched of, I believe, about 600 and some change $1,000. Anybody who can crack, not even really crack Monero, but just anyone who can figure out how to trace it, will get
right.
awarded that.
Yeah, it's weird. Obviously, like if like I said, we keep going back to that. If you're behind the original principles of crypto, then you would lean towards Monero over something like Bitcoin. Um, I think there might be something there to be said for the mass adoption and awareness that Bitcoin brings to the rest of cryptocurrency. That it would be unfair to say that it's not a significant portion of the movement towards cryptocurrency, and the awareness of, I guess, or the awareness of the idea of a trustless and permissionless system, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, it's definitely useful for that. I mean, it's what would you say? The other cryptocurrencies are basically standing on the shoulder of giants, right? And that giant being Bitcoin. It kind
Mhm.
of paved the road for us. It went through its sketchy phases where the only people that even really knew about Bitcoin or were using it were people on what was that website? Silk Road. Yeah, people doing that. That's when I first heard about it when I was in high school. Was there were kids like literally buying drugs off the Silk Road, like buying LSD and stuff, and I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, you get this thing called Bitcoin, and I was like, Bitcoin, what? Yeah, so that would have been, let's see, that was I think 2012 or maybe 2011 that I had first heard about it.
2014, I think, is when it like popped, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's when it really took off because that's like I guess one of my biggest regrets was not just buying it back then and holding it. I
Well,
actually
everybody
had
forget.
I had some Dogecoin around the time that I think it was around the time that first came out. I want to say 2014, right? Isn't that around when Dogecoin was launched?
I'd have to go Google it. The Doge.
Right. Well, anyway, I remember it like long before, Elon Musk tweeted about it or anything like that. There used to be faucets for Dogecoin, which, if you guys don't know about those, at least the Dogecoin faucet was basically just a website that you go to, and it had two buttons. I think one of them was just said wow, and the other one said much coin, and both of them would just deposit like 200 Dogecoin into your wallet. You would put your wallet into like a form on the web page, and there you go. Literally just a button that you could sit there and spam press, and you're like, look at me, I've got 10, I got 10,000 million internet coins. Yeah, but that's long gone. I wish I had that hard drive. Probably might be a
There's
decent amount of money.
gotta learn how to secure them private keys.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody learns that lesson the hard way in some form or fashion.
I'm just
Um,
glad I didn't have it with Bitcoin. I mean, worst case with Dogecoin, maybe I lost out like a couple $100. Because
yeah,
what did it pump to? 5 cents, I think, or 8 cents.
yeah. I think it went all the way up to 7 or 8, and then I think it's settled around 5 cents. I mean, obviously with Dogecoin, there's there's no development for it, right? And there's pretty much no supply cap. So, I mean, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, well, supply caps, that's another one of the things where maybe I need to talk to an economics expert about this because this is a debate that I've had with so many people, but I haven't talked to anyone that's enough of an expert. I almost feel like you don't want to have a hard cap for your cryptocurrency to be used as a currency, right? Like Bitcoin has a hard cap. And to me, that just means that the only thing that can happen with Bitcoins long term is for them to be destroyed. There's been so many that have already been destroyed due to people losing hard drives, people forgetting their keys, people dying, right? And not telling their loved ones or whoever in their will how to get access to them. And so it's just going to get to a point where it might take thousands of years, but the supply is just going to keep dwindling. I think you need to have, again, I'm starting to sound like a Monero shill, but you got to have something like Monero where there's a tail emission to continuously add more of the coins into the pool. Because if it's like party hats in RuneScape, right? So there was a finite amount of party hats. Once upon a time, a party hat might have been worth 10,000 GP. I know around the time I started playing RuneScape over a decade ago, it was a couple billion GP. You could still buy it, right? The max cash stack went up to 2.1 billion. But apparently now it's so ridiculous that if you want to buy party hats in RuneScape, you have to use other rare items like Santa hats to buy party hats because they're so, and you can't buy them on the Grand Exchange because with I think it's a Java limitation or however they did it where you can only go up to a certain amount of money. Yeah, that's the same thing's going to end up happening with Bitcoin, right? You'll probably get to the point where you can only buy Bitcoin with other finite supply cryptocurrencies that are just worth ridiculous amounts.
I mean, I think I hear the argument, but I mean, I think on the flip side of that, Bitcoin is being capped. I think the idea was, if I understand the white paper at all, would be that essentially you are protecting yourself against inflation of fiat, right? So with that cap. Now, there are other, like if we talk about Ethereum, I think there's a huge misconception with Ethereum, especially because I wanted to bring that back up. You had talked about it becoming deflationary, right?
Hmm.
Where we start burning, like what if we burn more fees than the block is generating? And then that's when it goes into like a deflationary status. Um, and that is what they think will drive the price of Ethereum up. But Ethereum is an application coin. In my humble opinion, those types of coins go up in value based on the projects built on top of their chain. So if we're talking about Cardano, DOT, Ethereum, whatever, Tron, the value is in the projects built on top of the chain, not the amount of tokens in the supply. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's why, like, even though I don't think that Ethereum would really be used as a currency, I mean, it's got uses that go far beyond just using it as a currency, but it has a better chance of doing that as far as having intrinsic value goes because there's more behind it. Like, I feel like Bitcoin, the main reason it has value is because it's this super rare thing. A lot of people, well, obviously there's blockchain technology that goes into it, but a lot of people, I think, are misunderstanding how it works. Um, like I've said, I really feel like if people really understood what it was all about, like how it works, they would appreciate it for the legacy, but they wouldn't value it a whole lot. And then as far as currencies go, gold was used as the currency for the longest time at thousands of years throughout human history. And so people will compare gold to Bitcoin by saying, there's a finite amount of gold, which is true, but we don't know when all the gold is going to be mined, right? Like there's more and
Right.
more that will be discovered. Eventually on Earth you'll run out of gold, and I'm pretty sure before then we'll be mining asteroids anyway. You finally have the private sector doing space, right? You got SpaceX, so we no longer have to wait on the government to make space travel innovations. We can have Elon Musk do it. Eventually it's going to get to the point where mining companies get involved, and real mining companies like mineral mining, and then you start mining asteroids. And then once it's cheaper to do that than to get the last little bit on Earth, you'll keep going. And then if you want to get super future sci-fi, well, not even sci-fi, because theoretically it'd be possible to create gold through fusing different atoms, right? Just go up the chain of the periodic table. I think you need to get to like a supernova to actually make gold, but it's possible. It could be done. Maybe millions of years from now.
I mean, so what is it? Projected last Bitcoin? I mean, it wouldn't even be mined till 2135 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's
So
got.
it's quite a ways away. And then you got to take into account that like most people are trading Bitcoin in the fractions, right? So um, I don't know how I kind of hear your point. I think there could be. I think that Bitcoin is the store of value, and then you could have a transaction coin, right? And then you could have, like the application coins. So you could have like Bitcoin as the store of value, basically based around that idea of limited supply. And then you can have something like Monero to transact your daily uh, costs or whatever, and then you can have like the application coins that are providing, like, in my opinion, things like Brave browser and so on and so forth is more like the answer than like UBI, right, where you're getting paid for your time and attention um, in some form or fashion. There's another company that I've been talking to that is working on uh, allowing users to control who buys and sells their data, and they actually get are enabling users to choose whether or not to sell it, and then compensating the users for selling it, which is interesting, an interesting idea. So, I kind of, like I said, like the whole Brave browser thing is interesting.
So
I think,
that's a project you're really interested in, Brave browser.
yeah, you should check it out. Brave browser is essentially, there's a couple things it does, right? So it's focused on privacy and security. It is a Chromium browser. Um, so you have to take that into account. But then it also facilitates essentially the earning of what their token called the BAT token, um, for any ads that you choose to see, right? So you're compensated for being advertised to, as opposed to compensating the service, right? As opposed to compensating Brave or Google or Amazon, you're compensating the user that you're advertising to.
Yeah, I thought that the blockchain integration was a little interesting. I personally don't run the Brave browser. I don't really know if I would recommend it either. So like you meant, and my reasons are a little bit different. So like you mentioned, it's a Chromium based browser. Pretty much every browser is Chromium based, with the exception of like Firefox and
Now, yeah.
yeah. So that's one of the reasons is I really don't like I don't like centralization on the blockchain, and I don't like centralization in browser usage either. So that's one of the reasons why I try to use browsers that are not Chromium based. Another thing is Brave's track record when they did that basically URL injection where they were putting their reference links into which one was it? There were certain sites like crypto trading sites where if you would go to them to sign up, you would actually be using Brave's referral link to sign up, which gives them some money, right? Some coins.
Compensation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a problem with that because one, it's basically URL injection that you're doing in everybody's browsers. Two, when it was default, it was not an it was a something you had to opt out of, right? And so that's another thing where I generally don't really like browsers where their default settings are not good, because you can ungoogle Chromium, you can like unmozilla Firefox. That's another thing that people do, but an average user is not going to do that. And so it's sort of like you're adding them into the botnet by doing this.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to talk about, Brave browser was the easiest example I could think of as far as like a replacement for using blockchain as a replacement for like something like a universal basic income or something where the idea is being compensated for the user's attention, not compensating a company for getting the user's attention. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense. And look, I think if I have to compare the Brave browser to Google Chrome, it's definitely the lesser of the two evils.
Well,
It's definitely the lesser of the two evils. Normal people using Brave, I guess, is a step in the right direction. I just always, with me, I always want people to sort of go to the limits of whatever their abilities are to do, right? Whether that be on the computer or whether that just be real life skills, physical skills, anything like that. I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to tech, they just throw their hands up in the air. They're like, this is too hard, this is too confusing. They give up, and then they choose the botnet, right? They choose to use Windows, they choose to use a Mac OS or Google Chrome or any of these other things that have horrible privacy features. And even if you don't really care about your own privacy, it affects other people among you. Like I know some people were a little upset that we did this on Google Meets, but
hey, you sent
that's
me the
mostly my
invite.
fault. Yeah, I'll admit that's my fault for not setting up to use a more secure live stream, or I guess video chat
Of course,
solution.
we are publicly broadcasting this on a Google platform. So,
Right.
like at the end of the day, like I'm sorry, like we're already using Google and YouTube's, and so maybe it's not that the end of the world, right?
Yeah, we'll have to do a tinfoil hat stream one day where we only use free software and we only stream to library. Do you have a
Okay.
library account, by the way?
You know, I have not used it in a long time. I probably do somewhere laying around. Um,
That seems like
but
it'd be right up your alley.
not, not every day. Yeah, it is. I'm also, you know, monetized on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, you can sync it actually.
Is
It's
it
not
so
super
it's like
complicated to do.
what's that called?
Like if
Not
you check
D2.
out Alpha Nerd on Library, that's my library account, but it's synced with the Mental
Okay.
Outlaw YouTube account. So anything that I post, this should go up there probably like 20 minutes, half an hour after. It automatically syncs.
Cross posts, yeah. But it doesn't, I mean, what are the, what's the, so the arguments I've heard against that, right, as a content creator, just coming from that perspective, is that wherever you build your audience, like if you disperse your audience across too many platforms, then you risk, being able to actually monetize effectively. And then if you're worried about monetization, to, I don't know, maybe enable yourself to do other things as opposed to working a day job. If that's your goal, then those are kind of the thoughts. That's the thought process behind it, right?
Um, Maybe. I mean, for me, I think here's how I think it probably breaks down, right? Because
Hmm.
there's different levels of people's concern when it comes to privacy, and there's different levels of people's ability when it comes to technology. So some of my viewers probably watch my stuff both on Library and YouTube. I know that
Right.
there's some of them that refuse to watch my videos on YouTube. Maybe they were like, streaming them through MPV. They probably did that. I do that for a lot of YouTube videos. Maybe they were downloading it with YouTube DL and then just watching it later, say if they don't have really great internet connections all the time. But yeah, you can actually broaden your audience a little bit because now that library exists and it's an option to do YouTube in a less spooky way, the people who are like hardcore, like the type of people that don't even carry around cell phones, right? Hardcore privacy
Right.
conscious. Now they get to see my content because
Right.
they
Okay.
wouldn't even touch YouTube.
I think
And the
you win that argument. I see where you're coming from, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and the fact that you can sync it because before, I mean, it was probably just part me being stupid because I'm like, it's weird. I'm really good with some technology, like if you need a network set up, if you need a server secured, I'm your guy for that. But social media, I'm like a total boomer. But you can sync it. I was able to figure it out. You'll probably be able to figure that out pretty easily, and it just automatically does it. Like I don't even really have to think about that. I go over there and look at comments and reply to comments from time to time. It's great,
Yeah.
and you get paid library tokens. Yeah, you get paid their library tokens. So that's how like they actually give you money on there.
Yeah, and well, and I knew that that's kind of like how that works, right? And then you got to go exchange those tokens or whatever. There's a couple other platforms that are coming out on the blockchain, but I don't think they're main. I don't think they have the same privacy focus, right? So you have what was that latest one? Well, you have D Live, and then you have like what DTube, some stuff like that.
Yeah, BitChute.
BitChute,
There's a bunch.
which BitChute kind of that's the one that kind of integrates with YouTube, right? In some way, like doesn't it just basically you can watch YouTube videos through it, sort of, but it
I don't
doesn't.
know. I've for me, BitChute was always just the platform for content that's too spicy for YouTube. You
Fair
know,
enough. You're
for
probably correct. It's
yeah,
just that.
that's what it's for.
What was
You
the?
go to
I could have
BitChute.
sworn there was one though where it's based off of YouTube. So like Theta.tv, have you heard of that one?
I don't think I've used that one now.
So that's like a Twitch competitor, but
Oh,
it
okay.
somehow also integrates with Twitch. So it's very odd. In the fact that like you can watch Twitch streams through it, but then you can also just watch Theta.tv streamers as well, which is kind of odd.
Hmm. Interesting. So since we've been talking about privacy and free software, uh, do you? So you're a miner. I'm imagining that you run a lot of mining OSs on your rigs, which
Yeah.
generally are Linux based. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're all Ubuntu distributions at this point. Like we talked about a little bit before, I was kind of, it would be nice to have different distribution options as well. They're very basic at this point. Most of them do support, the Stratum right out of the box stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. Um, there are essentially there's quite a few. There's three that are primarily used, and that's Simple Mining, Hive OS, and Rave OS. And typically they're used because they allow easy management of multiple rigs, right? So it's not necessarily for the security or the privacy aspect or anything like that. It's primarily for ease of use and like an online dashboard to.
Yeah. Usually, Ubuntu based or Ubuntu based is something that I wouldn't be a huge fan of, but I imagine that they're just TTYs. So you probably don't have all the snaps and the canonical nonsense that comes with those distros normally.
It's pretty stripped down. Maybe you should at some point, if you want to go over one, I could send you some and we could actually dig into that. That'd be kind of fun for my channel. Um, and maybe from a more privacy focused standpoint or security focused standpoint, right?
Yeah, I mean, generally, to optimize the privacy and security of any, whether it's a server or you're talking about a desktop OS, you pretty much just want to go through the KISS protocol, right? Keep it really simple, or keep it simple, stupid, and you want to just disable as many unnecessary things as you don't need. Like, earlier this year, I sort of took that to the limit that you can take with Linux by installing Gentoo. And technically, you can take it even further, right? You can install Linux from scratch, which is like full turbo Linux autism, but uh, there's not even really a point in doing that from my perspective because you're just not using a package manager. But yeah, with uh, what I was going to say is like with Gentoo, you can compile packages specifically. So you can like compile a package so that it's only going to work with Intel CPUs or so that it's only going to work with AMD CPUs. You can change things in the kernel. In fact, that's probably the only thing that you can really, as far as improving a mining OS would go, is you could probably cut some things out of the kernel that are unnecessary because I'd imagine the ones that you're talking about might just be using a stock Linux kernel. That might optimize the security of it a bit. No sense in like if it's just a TTY, there's no sense in having your kernel support like loading a full desktop. There's no point in it having like
Most of them don't do that, right? So I don't know of any that do. I think that, well, I take that back. I think the NVIDIA version of Hive OS does, but like I said, I don't really use many NVIDIA cards. But then the AMD version I know doesn't. It's so
yeah,
there's that.
but using it on Linux, that's good enough. You're not mining on Windows, are you?
So I teach people how to mine on Windows, but obviously that's because that's the install base, right? So that's kind of the I guess the perspective I take on it is like is getting the word out to the most amount of people as possible. But obviously, like mining on Windows is also just annoying at this point because of the amount of AV software. Basically, every miner is considered, malicious at this point. So it is turning into basically more of a pain than it's worth, right?
Hmm. Have you ever done a benchmark of comparing mining ability on Windows versus one of those Linux miners? So, obviously do it as scientifically as possible, remove every, variable, same drivers, same GPUs, etc.
Yeah, so across the board, they're pretty much the same. The only advantage that Linux begins to get is when you start going to more and more GPUs per system, right? And that's just limitations built into Windows, which can be worked around with. Lately, isn't as big of an issue. It used to be a bigger issue with Windows, and you would have to get like use Windows Server, for example. To
Yeah, they had the same problem with the Threadrippers when they first came out. You couldn't use, I believe it was beyond like 20 threads or 20 cores,
Right,
something like
yeah, so
that.
you had to install a different version. So, I mean, but as far as like power consumption so the only place where the power consumption is higher on Windows would be on the the CPU, motherboard, and so on, not necessarily the GPU. So the power consumption rates between Windows and like Linux would be the same for the GPU, but you may have like a few watts higher on like a Windows system, right? Just because it's using more processes. And that's about it, but not enough to affect the bottom line of a miner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes sense. And I would imagine a lot of miners probably don't really care about that either. I mean, most people in general don't care about whether they're using Windows or, they don't get into the nitty gritty of what their OS does. Um, I would probably say, like, if I was going to compare it, I would probably make a bigger deal at that point, right? That Windows just not really loading anything, right? Just loading your desktop is going to use more resources.
Mhm.
You can't go into a TTY only mode like that. But I wouldn't tell someone that they have to use Linux to mine, just because I would like as many people to mine as possible to
Yeah,
again prevent that centralization in China, like is happening
e-
now. If everybody was
exactly.
mining while they're on their computers while they were in bed, then we would be much more decentralized. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of the people that were coming up with crypto sort of wanted to happen. It's like, it's passive income, right? You just mine while you're sleeping. Hopefully, your cost of electricity is low enough to where you make a little bit of money, and then you're basically getting a little bit of free profit.
Right. And so if you go to my channel and you look at I have OS how to's for Hive OS for simple mining, and then we have like how to mine Ethereum on Windows 10. And the views aren't even close, right? So if our goal is to decentralize the currencies more, then it would be kind of silly to completely ignore the Windows segment, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. How about Mac mining? Is that even a thing?
I do have a guide on that from a long time ago. I need to re-update it though. That is a thing. You can do it. It works. It's not great. I mean, obviously, um, either a Hackintosh or a Mac Pro or something you would need to use, right? I guess unless you're doing Monero or something along those lines. But it's possible. It's not
Do you know if there's
impossible.
any that are optimized for the ARM chips?
Yet, no, I don't think so. The new M1s or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, the
No,
Macs
I
are
don't think
using.
so. I haven't gathered any wind of any. If I do find one, it'll be on the channel. So, but not at this time, no.
Yeah, probably not a lot of people really mining on Macs anyway. It's probably, again, a situation where they had a MacBook already and they're like, hey, why don't I try to make a little bit of money off of this thing? Let it
Well,
run in the
and
background.
I wouldn't recommend mining on laptops in general, especially overpriced laptops with warranties that you want to make sure stay intact. Seems like a not a good idea, right?
For sure. Now, there's a few coins out there that are made to sort of compete with Ethereum, right? It's kind of like the idea
Mhm.
that they do what Ethereum does, but better. Um, are there any that you really feel like could beat Ethereum just based on the technical details alone? And which ones do you think that would be?
Yeah, so I'll get called a shill again because I always get called a shill here. But here's the thing that I think people miss a lot of the time, and that's the fact that with application coins, you're talking about different programming languages most of the time. Okay. So I can give you an idea of a coin that's built better, but the consensus mechanisms are different. The scalability uh, is different, and the programming languages and the execution environments are different. So if you take something like Ethereum, which they're trying to move to 2.0, right? And 2.0 is going to change a few things. But as Ethereum stands right now, it is a single chain with a single execution environment, which is why it can't scale and why the fees are very high. Okay. And it uses Solidity as its programming language, and it uses proof of work as its consensus mechanism. Now, what Ethereum 2.0 is going to be is that it's going to be multi-chain. However, they are limited to 64 chains, right? It's going to be proof of stake for the consensus mechanism, and it's going to have multiple execution environments. The only difference really as far as there, well, and those are the only differences. The programming language remains the same. So did all that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that definitely makes sense. Yeah,
So let's
there's
talk
many
of,
different aspects that can be different
right.
between them.
So let's talk about something like Tron. So Tron would be the closest to Ethereum. And Tron is basically just a copy paste of Ethereum outside of the way it handles its execution environments and its fees, because they don't have any fees for devs. So it's cheaper to develop for Tron,
Okay.
essentially. But it's still a single execution environment with a single chain. So the goal was to solve the scalability issue, is to come up with a multi-chain coin, and then the proof of stake implementation makes it easier to scale that portion. And in theory, they say is more environmentally friendly. I have some arguments against that, but whatever. There's also arguments that proof of stake is not as secure as proof of work. But that we could go on for hours on that. So let's just talk about different projects as far as in competition with Ethereum or similar. So there's one called Polkadot right now. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't heard of Polkadot. Tell me about it.
Okay. So Polkadot is already ETH 2.0 essentially, or what has solved the issues that ETH had. So already. So it's multi-chain, and they call their chains parachains and parathreads, and those two have basically different, not different consensus mechanisms, but different fees to explain it at a very easy level way to understand. But the thing is like Polkadot can coexist with Ethereum because Polkadot uses Rust for the programming language and substrate framework.
Okay.
So when people are like, "Oh, Dot's the Ethereum killer," I'm like, "Hold on, it's not even really the same thing. It solves a different problem, right?" So the reason it uses the substrate framework, right, is so that you can make calls on it and still be able to scale across multiple threads or multiple chains. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. So Polkadot, I'm really heavy on because also they have the best wiki currently out. You can build your own coin or chain or token on it right now pretty easily just with their guides. They are by far the easiest one to actually start developing for. So that's why I like them. They have the most robust wiki and most robust guide to get started in working with them. You can also build, if you want, your own proof of work token on top of their chains, which is cool because they're a proof of stake coin at like the base, but you can build a proof of work token on top of them, which is cool. So after that, then you have Cardano, which I'm still working on my research through, and I can get to that in a different one, but it uses a completely different programming language that I can't recall. The ones that I've studied, like I've said, have been, as far as Ethereum, similar application coins would be Ethereum, Tron, and Polkadot so far. They have extensive research in right
Okay.
now.
Yeah, I've Tron has been on my radar. I've been looking into that one a little bit. Polkadot, like I said, never heard of it. Cardano, I've heard of. Haven't done much research on it either. So it sounds like you think that none of these are really going to end up replacing Ethereum, but they're going to have sort of slightly different niche case uses. Maybe almost like how you have different Linux distros, right, that are optimized for
Yeah.
different purposes. You got server distros, just works distros, hobbyist distros, etc.
The biggest mistake people get into when they get into crypto is being like, oh, what crypto is going to beat another crypto, when like there's so many different uses for blockchain that's just kind of a silly way to look at it, right? That's not going to be helpful for anybody either. I don't know, but either way, Polkadot, check it out. Like, it's a lot of fun to play with at the very least. I think that's why I like it, because when I hopped into the wiki and was like, oh, I can just start doing this stuff now. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, that's really cool. I can start building stuff. I'm just like, my career was just a cloud solutions guy, but like I can, play around enough to be like, oh, I can start building stuff here. So that's what I like. I like the chains and the projects where I can actually start doing things. So.
Nice. So let's take some questions from the chat. I see Red Light as said, I still don't quite understand proof of stake. So, do you think that you can give us a quick breakdown of proof of stake for someone that knows nothing about it?
Yeah, so essentially, proof of stake validates your transactions with other stakeholders. There's a couple different ways of doing it, and it really like depends on the coin and how they built that consensus mechanism. But at a very kind of easy to understand explanation, proof of stake is where essentially stakeholders lock up their coins. And so it's because they're frozen or whatever, and they'll do that within like usually a virtual private server, which we can get into why that's a problem. But that, and then it runs all the time and has a full sync of the node. And then they use that locked up coin to essentially validate the transactions on the chain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Let me see if Red Light responded back. Yeah, he said thanks. Cool. So we got that.
Proof of stake has a lot of problems. Like, I don't know, being centralized on AWS and Google and Azure.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
a
that's a
big
huge
freaking
problem.
problem.
Yeah, that's a huge problem, right? The fact that you've got a small handful of companies that, we don't
And
even
if
have
you're
to
a
put the
staker,
tinfoil hats on to know that they
yeah,
collude together. Like, we know that
yeah,
there's collusion going on with
they've
them.
shut down stuff. It
Yeah.
did proof of stake when people are like, "Oh, it's better, it's more decentralized, or it's this or that." I'm like you're completely missing the point. It's all running on server infrastructure. And the thing is, if you're a stakeholder, do you want to have a 24-hour service that's running and monitoring your wallets and making sure that it's continuing to stay up so that you can actually generate that revenue, or run it on your desktop that may go down while you're out to eat? You see what I'm saying? So like, it's not fair to say, oh, well, it's because the stakeholders are doing it wrong. Because like it's almost financially irresponsible to run it like on your desktop at the house, unfortunately, right? You need it running to actually generate the revenue.
All right. And here's a question from MacDev. Opinion on botnets mining Monero. I guess I'll give my opinion on this first, because I guess I'm a little harsh, but I feel like if you become part of a botnet, it's kind of your fault. You got to know how to secure your stuff too. So, and for people who maybe don't know what a botnet is, it's basically when you get some type of virus on your computer that allows somebody to take it over. Okay, so it's they'll usually have a remote shell, and they can execute any command on your computer. They can make your computer do anything as if they were right there in front of it. So they'll have a Monero miner or maybe some other type of cryptocurrency mining in the background while you're just going about your day-to-day life and making them money. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion on it. Do you have a
Yeah.
different opinion on
So
that?
what's more fun is that it's actually easier than that with something called Coin Hive. And I probably just gave everybody a terrible, great idea. But Coin Hive, you can build it in a manner that mines Monero straight from the browser. So you don't even need any sort of additional access. It was a lot of companies got caught doing it. It was getting put into Google ads for a while. This is back in 2016, 2017. there were ad companies that were caught basically injecting that into their ads, and Google was even running those ads. That's part of why that adpocalypse happened, by the way, we talked about earlier. So I think there's more to it than just right, like the botnets or like any sort of malware on the system.
Well,
Does
you
that make sense?
can. Well, yeah. So okay, there are crypto miners in the browser as well, and that's kind of what I'm talking about as far as mitigation, right? So you have to mitigate a, you know, some because it's going to be an exe, right? Maybe
Mhm.
someone out there once got a crypto miner installed on their Linux, but for the most part, it's Windows users that this happens to. So on Windows, if you're going to use it, you have to know that your operating system is fairly vulnerable, both due to the design of Windows, but also due to the fact that if I'm a hacker, I want to make as much money as possible by hacking. So I'm
Mhm.
going to code my malware for Windows. I'm going to target Windows users because that makes up the majority of the market share. So, like, what you would have to do if you're a Windows user, for example, is you probably shouldn't be doing any piracy, right? So, I'm not even going to touch piracy on a moral basis, but oftentimes pirated software will come bundled with some type of malware, could be a crypto miner or something like that. So, you should avoid that. And then, as far as your browser goes, you have to have that secured as well. So you might want to use a browser like LibreWolf, for example. I think has a very good balance between working as far as what a normal person would consider a working browser and being very secure. Um, I haven't personally tested things like Twitter or Facebook with it because I don't really use those. But YouTube works with LibreWolf. Reddit works with LibreWolf. So I guess that's kind of what normal people do on the browser. Uh, yeah, you gotta mitigate that stuff, and then if you don't know, I guess ask somebody or at least look it up because I feel like a lot of this type of stuff there's so many people like me that are making videos about how to secure this or how to secure that that you could probably find it. And there's people with much better production quality than
Yeah.
me that really
Well, and
explain it.
if I can do a plug for another crypto channel, he focuses a lot on security for crypto and around crypto. So if that's okay with you,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Anyone that's going to, because with crypto and this, privacy, security, free software, all of that stuff, I want to spread awareness about it. I want more people to know, if even if it's just a passing topic, people will at least have it in the back of their mind, maybe think about it when they're bored and start looking into it.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll share him with you. You'll like him. He's a Monero guy too, obviously. So I say obviously, but it's Seth Estrada on YouTube. If you guys want to go check him out, he focuses a lot more on that whole entire security and privacy section of crypto.
All right. Let's see. Do we have anything else? What crypto wallet do you recommend? And I guess that this would go as both a general crypto wallet, and I guess you can go per however many coins you want to list off, because there's a lot.
The best crypto wallet is a paper crypto wallet,
Okay.
pretty much. If you're worried about security and securing your funds and whatnot, right? Um,
Do you
so
want to
that
explain what a paper wallet is?
So you can essentially generate a seed online and then basically write that seed down. You'll get the wallet address, and that is the only time it would ever be on the PC at all, right? And then you can kind of close out of it and put that away in a safe or whatever along those lines. That's going to be like your long-term non-spending holdings. That's going to be traditionally the most recommended by people that are worried about security and privacy. There are like etched out like cards that you can get where you basically etch into them the private keys, and you can keep it that way. Then, of course, your next step would be going to a hardware wallet, which is similar to if you guys are aware of or know what like YubiKeys are, for example. Which, yes, I realize there are problems with them. Like I said, the best is probably a paper wallet if you're super concerned about that. But They are called like the Ledger and the Nano. I stay away from the Ledger because the Ledger requires you to sign up with user data. Uh, the Trezor does not. So I lean towards Trezor because it doesn't require you to sign up with user data. Also, Ledger lost or got hacked and lost a lot of user data. And if you already buying a hardware wallet, I don't know why you would want to go that route. And then the step up from there, then we start talking about hot wallets or wallets that are connected to the internet for exchanges and stuff. And there, the problem is your geographical location and what you're trying to do. So none of them are great, and any of them that you use are going to require some sort of user registration if your end goal is to exchange for fiat. So you have things like crypto.com, Coinbase, so on, so forth. I would recommend keeping a majority of your funds out of there, but practically, I understand a lot of people need to actually exchange it and get real money sometimes, right? So I would lean towards, I guess, crypto.com in that case. And then, of course, if you're wanting to utilize stuff on the blockchain, as far as like with Ethereum, and you want to do swapping and so on, then MetaMask is an option for that. And MetaMask is built into Chromium browsers and Firefox, as well as there are apps, but you need to be careful because Google was taking ads for MetaMask that have rotten seeds built into them. So if you're on a Google Chrome browser, a Chromium-based browser, or you are on Android phone, you need to actually type in the URL for metamask.io and verify that you're going to the legitimate website and getting the link from there for any Google-based devices right now.
Now, does that issue also exist with the MetaMask add-on when it's in Firefox, or is this just on Chromium browsers?
So that's all Chromium browsers and Android Play. It's the Android Play Store specifically.
Oh, okay. So if you were, for example, using MetaMask on Google Chrome on a desktop, then you don't have that problem, I'm guessing. At least
Can
as
you
far as
repeat?
you
I'm
know.
sorry.
So if you're using a Chromium-based browser like Google Chrome on the desktop, do you
Right.
have that same problem with MetaMask?
Because it still goes through that Google Play Store and the ads, at least in theory, right? So there have been rotten seeds that are coming through those ads. So either way, the easy way to get around this is to make sure that you're going to the official website for MetaMask and clicking their app downloads from there and the plugin downloads from there.
All right, so there you go. You want to do paper-based wallet because obviously, if there's no computers or electricity involved, CIA can't come after you, right? Unless they beat the hell out of you and make you give
No,
up where the wallet's hidden.
no comment on that, but yeah.
And then hardware wallets. I think you mentioned Ledger. What do you think about people making their own hardware wallets? Because at the end of the day, it's basically just an encrypted drive, right?
Right. So obviously, I do that. I have encrypted USB drives and so on, and that is definitely an option. The it can be a little tricky because every seed kind of behaves differently. It depends on like what coin and so on. But you can always just use that to like back up like the physical or the not the physical, but the applications that you run. Like let's say like you want the specifically like the Monero wallet that's installed, the desktop application, can't remember the name of it, but you can back that up, right? So to basically like an encrypted drive as well. So that's possible to do and definitely worth it. I think that for like ease of use, like I said, the Trezor is just really easy to use for like common people because it plugs in, but it does go in through your browser, right? So that's kind of the downside there. And then like I said, Ledger makes you sign up with user data. So I'm not a fan of that one.
Okay, I actually didn't know that about Ledger. Yeah, because I mean, I wasn't really too interested in hardware wallets just going out and purchasing one just based off the fact that, like I said, you can encrypt a hard drive, you can encrypt a USB, and it's essentially the same
Yeah.
thing. So it sounds like you kind
The,
of have the same
well, the
opinion there,
only
right?
thing the hardware wallet does is, like I said, it functions like a YubiKey. Have you used YubiKeys before?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of similar to that. The only difference being the code, the pattern for the 9-digit numbers or 9-digit screen is displayed on the physical device and not displayed on the machine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
So I guess there's a
I've
little
seen it. Yeah,
extra there.
it's definitely got that that too, but it's serving as sort of a two factor, right? Something that you have,
Right.
and you could, I'm pretty sure you could program that to use like a different two factor, like an actual YubiKey key. You could probably set it up to where it
You can
text
NBI
messages
or
you.
whatever.
Right. Yeah. The only it's been a long time since I ever made a hardware wallet, but I just did it as an encrypted flash drive for the lulz. So what are your opinions on DeFi or
Um,
DeFi? That I'm
I,
not
I
100%
yeah,
sure.
so decentralized finance is what it stands for. So I think DeFi would be the correct pronunciation, right? Decentralized and then finance. Yeah, so DeFi. Um, so first of all, right now in its current form, it is super expensive. So it's a rich man's game, making it kind of difficult to get into just based off of the Ethereum fees, right? Which is why Ethereum is so profitable to mine as well on the flip side there too. Um, it is going to, I think it does at the end of the day, reduce privacy because its goal is to record all assets, right? On the blockchain in kind of a public form. So from your perspective, I guess that might be something that you would think about. In theory, once you get to layer two, that goes away, I suppose. But layer two is more trying to solve fees and stuff like that right now, because you basically deposit into layer two and then do whatever swaps you want there with a reduced fee structure or whatever. I think it's an interesting idea, but I haven't really like my problem is that that barrier to entry dissuades me from being able to participate on a level to that I can get a full opinion on, I suppose.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
I really don't know very much about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's that's
So
another area of crypto where I have to do more research before I feel like I can give any decent opinion
so
on it.
it's tokenized, so it's tokenized assets, right? That's what it is essentially. And then you swap those assets. The most popular one would be like Uniswap. And then you can do things like essentially okay, so a problem with it does solve the centralization of exchanges. So that is the positive side of it. Okay. So the way it does that is the users actually put up half worth of one token and half worth of another token. And then because that's in there, other users can use that to trade those tokens back and forth. So it solves the centralization issue of exchanges, which is the positive side. And basically, there will be tokens that represent other coins, but obviously, because it's built onto ETH, it has to be wrapped. So usually, it'll be preceded with a W. So for Bitcoin, for example, if you want to trade Bitcoin within DeFi or whatever, and you have Bitcoin and you have ETH, it would be labeled as the token, which would be WBTC and WETH.
Okay, so it's basically the cashless exchanges.
Right.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. I got it. All right.
Okay.
Um, so this was one that I think both of us can answer. I'll start with it. I think we'll make this the last one because we're a little over an
Okay.
hour now. Do you think it's an issue that most people treat cryptocurrency as a stock slash way to make money and aren't interested in it in its actual use or social mission? So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, right? There's
Yeah.
different minds that are approaching cryptocurrency. You've got some people who are investors that to them, Bitcoin, Monero, anything else is no different than buying Coca-Cola stocks. It's no different than buying shares in oil. It's just buy low, sell high. That's all it is to them. And then you've got the people like myself that are interested in it as a real form of currency. The thing is, these people need to work together to ultimately get it to become a currency, right? So it's none of the cryptocurrencies really have a chance of becoming a currency until enough people get involved with it, right? Like right now, there's not really anybody accepting Monero unless you want to like go buy crack on the dark web.
Yeah.
That's really the only people. I think ISIS accepts donations in Monero. There's right, like there's not a whole lot of people that are really using it. So you're going to have to get business people involved. You're probably going to have to get just people putting money into it just so that it has a larger market cap to add some stability to it. And then you need the people who actually understand the technology to try to herd them into the coins that are going to be whichever coins that you think are going to be the most useful. Like the guy who's a family friend of mine, I remember he was asking me about Dogecoin because he wanted to go get another crypto. Like he held Bitcoin. I think he tripled his money with it. He's like, what to buy next? And I was like, you should get Monero. And that was during the same conversation where I was asking him why he values Bitcoin. And he
Mhm.
pretty much ended up describing Monero to me. And I'm like, well, this is what this actually is. So, put some money into that to help with the market cap since you've got thousands of dollars laying around. And yeah, that's pretty much my view on it. How about you?
I mean, I think you're pretty close there. I would agree, Matt. So for anything for crypto to get to the point to where we need it to be usable, it needs mass adoption. And what influences mass adoption? Money influences mass adoption. So that's the way our world currently functions. You could consider it a necessary evil or whatever. But at the end of the day, without mass adoption, you can't have any real change. So if it's just this underground, to go buy drugs or you knock off, whatever, like hire a hitman or whatnot, that's not really mass adoption. So it's not going to change the world in any form or fashion. And unfortunately, money talks, and that's kind of the way it functions. Um, I think that once people have started adopting it, they can start seeing the uses as it's laid out. And then you can use that portion of like that incentive of making money to then start educating people on why it's important. Right.
Sure. All right. So I think we'll end the stream there. Again, Matthew, thanks for coming on. I've got Matthew's channel in the description. So it's Son of a Tech on YouTube. If you want to know anything about crypto in general, he's got so many videos on there. He can show you how to mine. He breaks down a lot of the sort of complicated technical aspects into something simple that anybody can understand.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man. I enjoyed.
Awesome. See you guys.